Yesterday, I got caught up on some of the great films that we showed on TCM. Yes, I stopped watching Filmstruck for a hot minute to catch up on some TCM because it's this great new set coming out from Kino about women film pioneers. And of the stuff we showed, we're doing two nights. It was on the 1st, and then we're going to do again on the 8th. And of the films, we showed a handful of them I had seen, the Alice Guy, the Lois Webbers, but there were 4 films that I had not seen, and I was very excited to watch them. The first was 1916's Her Defiance, and it's directed and starring Cleo Madison, and she plays a woman who is growing up on a farm, and she falls in love with another of them, a man not picked by her family, and in a shocking turn of events, she gets pregnant, but he leaves to go to the city to find his fortune. And when her family finds out she's pregnant, they try to marry her off to this um, older farmer that lives next door. But he is just as abusive as her brother was and horrible. And finally, she decides she can't take it anymore, and she's going to leave and go to the city as well. And more chaos ensues. I don't want to tell you how it ends, but it's just a very tight two-reeler with a great lead performance from Cleo Madison, and you can see early on how different a film like this, directed by a woman, feels, because it doesn't fall into stereotypical melodramatics. She's a much stronger woman trapped in a melodramatic situation than you would often see at this time, and I think that 100% comes from having someone like Madison at the making the decisions behind the camera as well as in front of the camera in a true auteur sense. The next film was 1916's Call of the Cumberlands, and if you go on IMDb, it does not credit the woman as the director, but research proves she was the director. It's Julia Crawford Ivers. She was not a star. She was just a director, behind the scenes kind of person, which was, again, rare at this time. You mostly had star performer directors, and you had a handful of women who were directors behind the camera only, like Lois Weber. Julia Crawford Ivers wrote many, many films featuring complicated women at this time, and lots of them are lost now, but thankfully Call of the Cumberlands is one that still exists. It's about an hour long, and it follows a man who has gone off to New York to become a painter, but he has to come home to fix a feud that's happening in the mountains of Kentucky. Shenanigans ensue. There's a great lead performance by Winifred Kingston as the woman he left behind. It's very much in the vein of not quite Western, but these sort of fringe country stories. There's a lot of these at this time period of stories that take place up in the mountains, stories that take place in the forests, that are sort of city slicker ends up out in the country kind of stories. There's a lot of these. But this one has a mixture of great outdoor scenes as well as contemplation of the importance of art. So it's quite interesting. So this is Call of the Cumberlands. And then the next one was a straight up Western. It's called 4917. And it is written and directed by Ruth and Baldwin from a story by William Wallace Cook. And it stars Joseph W. Girard as a judge who's about to retire. He's looking back on his life, and he's remembering the most thrilling time in his life was during the gold rush in 1949, and now it's 1917, and he's just old and tired, but rich. So he goes out to the west from the east. He explains why he left the west in the first place and had to go back to the east, and then he goes back to the west, buys a ghost town, hires some actors to recreate the gold rush, recreate this time in his life that he loved, but then chaos ensues when a real crime starts happening. And what you have is both a Western and a critique of Western tropes all in one film. And there's some great supporting performances from people like Jean Hersholt, who would go on to be one of the great, actors of the late silent era. It's a film that very much disproves the idea that women cannot do genre, that women cannot do action, because women were there at the start of genre and at the start of action. And I've mentioned this many times, but let me tell you about all the great chase films that were directed by men and women at this time. So this was a fun, again, Western spoof type thing. There's great villains and gunfights and all kinds of things that you would expect in a Western. And these restorations, they're mostly 2K restorations. They are gorgeous that the Library of Congress did on these prints. I can't wait to get this Kino set and watch all of the films. The last one is a true rarity and a true um, important piece of American and just world cinema in general. It's called The Curse of Gwon, When the Far East Mingles with the West. It's from 1916, and unfortunately, all that's left are 2.5 reels. This film was an 8-reeler. It was supposed to be, almost 2 hours long, and it's written, directed, and co-stars Marian E. Wong, plus her family, including her sister-in-law, Violet Wong. Marian E. Wong was a third-generation Chinese American. Her family had come during the gold rush to help build, or post-gold rush to help build San Francisco, and all of those jobs that were the railroad jobs, etc., that were done by Chinese immigrants. So you have such a rich Chinese culture in San Francisco, and she was a third generation Chinese American, and she had decided she wanted to show America what being Chinese and what being Chinese American was all about. This is 100 years ago. We're still fighting this battle 100 years later. Like, what the fuck? And so she wrote this story that was originally just a love story, but then she added some bits of Chinese culture after having traveled back to her home country. Well, not her home country, her family's home country, seeking a husband. She did not marry the husband. She did not like him. She came back, added traditional Chinese culture mixed in with American melodrama, and it's really a story about assimilation and the perils of assimilation when you are still living in a community with those that are holding on to old ways, and also in a community where your old ways are looked down upon, and how do you balance that? Unfortunately, the bulk of the story, the curse, etc., is not what's left. What you get mostly in the reels that are left are the home life of this family, the interaction with the sisters, the interaction with the parents, the mixture of Western culture, San Franciscan culture with their traditional Chinese culture, and it's truly a fragment, but a beautiful, interesting, wonderful fragment, and thankfully was preserved and restored by the Library of Congress. It actually was just basically put in a basement by her after it was shown privately twice, unable to get distribution because, surprise, we were always racist, and just put in the back, and she never made another film. And it's so beautifully shot with some really interesting angles and camera work and moments of domesticity that are shot in a way that could have been really gazy and aren't, that makes you really mourn what could have been if she had been able to make more films. So certainly a gem. So seek it out. So this was, again, Cleo Madison's Her Defiance, Julia Crawford Ivers' The Call of the Cumberlands, Ruth Ann Baldwin's 4917, and Marian E. Wong's The Curse of Gwon. And they'll all be available on this great Kino set that will be coming out in a few months, or maybe it's at the end of the year. Look for that. Watch all the films. Remember that women literally built this industry, and they were pushed out by financiers, and they should have their place right back where they belong. Have a good day.